In the world of handmade boots, I mean really handmade boots, this is the American Pacific Northwest White's MP boot. And this is the Australian Wooten's Smith Chelsea work boot. How do they compare? G'day, welcome back to Philosophy. If we haven't met before, my name is Tech, and I'm here filming on Whadjuk country in Perth in Western Australia. In the world of heritage boots, handmade boots take on a certain cachet, like they are becoming more and more the holy grail, the disappearing dinosaur bones, the relics that everyone claims they have, but with so many differing degrees of handmade that sometimes we wonder if a pair of hands carries it from machine to machine. Is it really handmade? If you said that handmade boots are primarily crafted by hand, often by skilled artisans rather than mass-produced by machines, I wouldn't argue. The problem, however, is the phrase crafted by hand. Many heritage brands nowadays talk about there being traditional handmade boots when realistically they probably mean that they make it using traditional methods. They use quality materials and emphasize the craftsmanship of the people who cut and sew and shape. Most of them will agree they use stitching machines. Some even use machines to pull the uppers over the last, after which the craftsmen tack the boots onto the last, shave the folds and stitch the bottoms using again stitching machines. R.M. Williams's handmade boots do this. To be honest, I know very few people who actually do everything by hand, including stitching the pattern pieces together without any kind of stitching machine. One of them is a Canadian maker called Uncle Dan's Boots on Instagram. However, I think we can agree that if we take a realistic base view, then brands that mostly use hands, even if they use a clicking machine, say, to cut the pattern pieces, they start the right way. Especially as this takes the skill of an experienced eye to choose the best parts of the hide without wasting too much. Then, if they use hands to guide the pieces through skiving machines, stitching machines, hand glue liners and heel and toe stiffeners to shape the uppers, they're worthy of being called handmade. Especially good points to them if they then hand bottom by stitching the welts to the insoles and the uppers to the welts. If that were the case, taking aside the clicking machine, the stitcher and the skiver, that seems to me to be as good as you can get in today's heritage boot handmade world. So while there are a few brands that you can allow for these basic machines and say that they are handmade, I've chosen to compare the US Pacific Northwest maker White's and their MP boot, which is still my Grail boot, to the Australian brand based outside of Melbourne called Wooten. You can check out both websites, which I've linked down below, and neither are affiliate links. So, White's and Wooten, makers of handmade boots. There are differences, firstly in history, the size of the businesses, and in the construction methods. White's has been around since the American Civil War, and today they are a foundational P&W bootmaker with a reputation for durable boots, even though they have models that nod to fashion, such as these MP boots. A couple of years ago, White's were reported to have annual sales of around 12 million US dollars, so they're not small. And I've seen it reported that they employ around 80 people. Wooten, on the other hand, is very much a small company, with the owner and his wife fronting the show and employing only 3 or 4 other people, making maybe 400 or so pairs of boots every year. They are a continuation of an older brand, but Jess Wooten put his mark and made it Wooten brand only in 2012. This is the White's MP boot. Now, I have several versions of this boot because it's my grail. And I have another pair of White's, their tall mock-toe Fulton work boot. The Fulton, and nowadays several other models, are not as intensely handmade as these MP boots. In fact, you can now get the CMP version of these MP boots, which is a traditional stitch-down version of these MPs. Still hand-lasted and hand-bottomed and all leather, don't worry about that. But the difference with these MPs are that these are hand-welted using a weird method called a rolled welt, where the main construction is also a stitch-down construction, but involves using a welt made from the same leather as the uppers. It's stitched to the uppers like the wrong way, if you like, and then it's rolled over to form a welt. And the hand stitch goes through that as well as the midsole, but looking like a stitch down stitch. The result is a rather squidgy welt that looks like a strip of chewing gum. It's really hard to explain. Go and see their video about it or check my MP boot review. These boots are about as handmade as whites will practice these days, relying heavily on the eyes and hands of experienced craftsmen rather than mass producing the model on a mechanized production line. While having some ready-to-wear boots, they are mostly made to order, and unsurprisingly for their handmade nature, your order could take weeks to fulfill. The MP boots are heavy, durable, tough boots, despite being designed and introduced as a lifestyle boot during the early interest in service boots in the 2000s. Made on an MP last, which is a modified Barry last, they have all the P&W hallmarks of leather on leather on leather arch support, a raft of a midsole on which everything sits proudly, thick 2mm plus chrome excel leather, and that burly rolled welt look to the stitch down construction. As befits a P&W boot, it's leather lined in the vamp, but the shaft itself is unlined. As befits its work boot genesis, it has a big gusseted tongue, tough brass hardware, including these feet hooks that are more milled post than bent metal, and some pretty beefy stitching evident on the welt. They are recraftable, but because of the weird rolled welt setup, your average cobbler would probably stuff it up, and it's probably advisable you check the skill of the cobbler. Trenton Heath have resold rolled welts before, and even they found it a bit odd. Either that or send it back to whites. Every time I put these on, I feel capable of withstanding nuclear and zombie attacks and ready to land on the beaches of World War II. Now, let's look at the Wootens. The Wootens are also sturdily made, but with more of an eye to comfort and finish. This is their Smith work boot, obviously a Chelsea boot design that Australians wear as light to medium work boots in construction or farming. The Australian tan rough-out uppers are thinner. They're about 1.8 millimeters, and it has a soft leather lining taking up the total thickness to 2 and a bit mils. They feel lighter because they don't have the leather-on-leather construction underfoot, but they are made to last miles, if not to kick zombies. The nods to comfort are the rounder toe last and the capacity to insert a 3mm foam insole if you want, as well as the donut hole cork insert, and more of that later. The construction method is a Blake Rapid or Mackay stitch, where the uppers and insole are stitched directly through the midsole, and then on the outside edge of the midsole, which acts like a welt, it's stitched to the outsole. Don't confuse this with the Blake stitch, where everything is stitched together with one stitch on the inside, and any welt-looking like thing is purely cosmetic. The Blake Rapid or Mackay stitch is both recraftable and water resistant because of the two stitch lines. The donut hole that I referred to earlier is where Jess Wooten cuts a hole through the midsole under the ball of the foot. As the boots don't actually have a welt, there's no normal cavity caused by the welt, so this donut hole creates the opportunity for the cork filler. Now, this is a smart innovation and gives you the comfort of the cork in between the outsole and the leather insole. The outsole, like many parts of this boot, is up to you to choose and can range from this rubber outsole to Vibram and Dr. Sol products, all the way to a full leather outsole. That's the other thing about Wooten. Due to the size and production process, you can choose just about any part to be different. The stitching color, the edge color, obviously the uppers. You can do these with whites too, but to a lesser degree. Price-wise, the MP boots in this format are listed at US $750 or about 1150 Aussie dollars, while a pair of standard option Wooten Smith boots are listed at 980 Australian dollars, which at today's exchange rate is about 580 US dollars. I imagine if you order them from the US, you'll be up for courier charges for sure, and whatever tariffs are applying at the time to leather products from Australia, this day, this week, this hour, God knows. In terms of being handmade, the whites boots are clicked on a machine. But note my previous comments about the skill of a clicker and the skill that he needs to identify the faults on the hide. Choose matching pieces so that the two boots look the same, and position the cutting dies in such a way as to avoid faults, match the pieces, and still end up with as little waste as possible. Looking at this Chrome Excel MP and my other MP boots, there is very little evidence of any loose grain. The pattern pieces are skived and then stitched together using skiving machines and stitching machines. And in many ways, despite the skill of the person doing all this to the pattern pieces, they are assembled in a very utilitarian work boot-like way. If you look at the stitch lines, you can't fault them. But clearly they're not Viberg perfect. They wave around a bit despite being ultimately strong. The MPs are hand-bottomed, meaning they are hand-lasted, and all the bottom bits, including glues and so on, are applied by hand. The rolled welt stitching is done by hand, by strong hands if you see what any awl has to pierce, and the way that the stitches in the welt are tightened in the stitch-down construction, they are done by strong and expert hands. But again, it is very utilitarian. I mean, you look at the uneven stitches and inconsistent stitches per inch on the welt. However, it's so strongly made you might shake your head and sigh at the finish, but you don't question the sturdiness. And in part, it's why you desire this pair of boots. As for the Wooten Smiths, the clicking is cut by hand with shears and a knife, involving all the skill I talked about in combining the right choice with least waste. The pattern pieces are stitched on a machine by Jess, or one of his workers, whom I believe is unfortunately pretty ill at the moment. It apparently takes a while to train someone to stitch with the consistency and the clean lines required, so Jess is doing most of the stitching at the moment. They are partly hand-bottomed, being hand-lasted, hand-glued and nailed, hand-corked, but then stitched with a Mackay stitching machine. The finish shows more care. The finish is much more consistent and clean than the MP boots, and in the right uppers with a slimmer last could pass as a smart casual boot to wear with smart pants and a dressy shirt. I said earlier that the Wootens are designed and finished with sturdiness in mind, but definitely with an eye for comfort. I paid extra to have these custom fit to my measurements, which I sent by email, and when I got them, the fit was excellent, taking into account my size 7.5 UK feet with a wider ball and instep than normal. I opted to keep the 3mm foam insert inside and wear this with a thinner or medium socks. But eventually the rougher uppers did relax a little, and I can wear these with the insert with thick boot socks. The feel is comfortably snug, with cushion underfoot for long days walking or standing on your feet. The elastic goring panels are firmly stretchy, and they keep the tension around my ankles, but also allows me to kneel without feeling like I'm choked. I do not wear these as work boots, but if that is your intent, they're suitable for light to medium work, like on a farm maybe, or livestock property perhaps, or in some light construction work as maybe an electrician or a plumber. As for the whites, the P&W heritage is apparent as soon as you put them on. The MP last is a strange, long, narrow last. My UK 7.5 translate to a US 8.5, and as noted on their website, these are a half down in size 8D. They're snug enough from side to side, but I get the feeling that the toe box is a teeny bit longer than necessary. Not really by much. It's more of a feel than a definite, slip. There is a possibility that I should take these in a 7.5 double E, but I'm really not game to experiment with a $1,200 boot from overseas. How I did experiment was to buy a pair from eBay, cheaper. It was 7D. They were not too short, and although nearly, but they were fitting within a wide gap between the lace facings. Not uncomfortable, but visually small, and despite that, I wear those a lot without discomfort. The feel is a lot more solid, and I guess intentionally so as an American service boot coming from Pacific Northwest work boot origins. You kind of feel encased and pretty invulnerable and wanting to kick things. They're not uncomfortable. The arch support is really quite good, especially as the width is a good old firm handshake. And all that leather under keeps your feet in the right position throughout the day's activities. In summary, what one concept would I have that differentiates the White's MP handmade boots from the Wooten Smith handmade boots? You know what? I think they were made for the conditions of their origins. Australia's heavy industry workers, heavy construction, mining, gas, bush firefighting, these people wear protective modern boots. The concept of the heritage logging boot, say, went out in the 80s as we lost our heritage footwear factories. So our conditions are aimed toward light and medium work and to comfort, because heritage boots compete against a very comfortable and squishy work boots. At the same time, the idea of handmade being rough and ready is foreign to us. I think overall our society demands handmade to also be well finished. That's what I'm paying for, we think. Now, the American Pacific Northwest boot scene comes from 100 years of logging and forest firefighting, and it appears that if not always existing, the heritage boot scene is at least revived. This means that American heavy industries do wear these heritage style work boots where they're produced by hand, and who cares about stitch per inch, you pansy Aussie? These are hardy and they're going to last. If you wear the Smith to an American worksite, I suspect you might see raised eyebrows and maybe be called a weirdo. If you wear the MPs to an Aussie worksite, you're going to get laughed out of court for being a willy head. And that's it to me. The different cultures maketh the boot to suit. There you go. Remember to click on the like button if you enjoyed this, and I hope you did. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the boot reviews I put up each week. Until next time, you take care out there and see you again soon.